The true monsters, I learned early on, rarely announce themselves with claws bared or teeth sharpened. They arrive bearing fragrant bouquets, whispering promises of unwavering devotion, sealing covenants with gleaming gold rings. They meticulously construct a shared life alongside you, father the children you cherish, and only then, once irrevocably embedded within the very chambers of your heart, do they commence their insidious feast, devouring your spirit peace by agonizing peace. And the most terrifying aspect? Your screams remain unheard, swallowed by the suffocating silence behind closed doors, because to the oblivious world outside, you remain imprisoned within the flawless facade of the perfect family you desperately pretend to be. My name is Josephine Marie Connors, though most folks here simply call me Josie. I've reached 85 years now, and for more than half a century, I've carried a secret within me, a corrosive truth that has eaten away at my soul like rust-consuming old iron. Before I unburden myself further, might I ask you to share your location in the comments? Knowing where my voice finds listeners offers a profound connection. Please also consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support grants me strength and helps ensure these difficult stories reach others who might find solace or courage within them. Thank you. I was born and raised here in Millfield, a small, unassuming town nestled deep within rural Pennsylvania, where the mornings arrive crisp and cold, and the quiet nights seem to guard the secrets of traditional families more fiercely than any locked deed box. Many townspeople recognize me only as the kindly elderly woman selling homemade molasses cookies at the Sunday farmers market, perpetually clad in a floral print dress, a scarf habitually covering my now white hair. Few could possibly conceive of the harrowing journey I've traversed, the profound darkness I've harbored since the tender age of 23. It feels imperative now, long past time, to finally speak my truth. Not solely for my own catharsis, for I have learned, through necessity, to bear this heavy burden, but rather for all the women, past and present, who, like my younger self, endure a private hell behind the closed doors of their own homes, silenced by fear, immobilized by shame, or constrained by the fierce protective instinct towards their children. Perhaps, in hearing my account, another woman, somewhere, might find the courage I lacked for so tragically long. My beginnings were humble, typical for a girl growing up in rural Pennsylvania during the 1940s. My father, Anthony, toiled endlessly in the surrounding cornfields, rising before the first rooster crowed, returning only after the stars had fully populated the night sky, his body weary but his spirit kind. My mother, Sarah, managed the household with quiet efficiency, raising 5 children while simultaneously finding precious spare moments to create intricately patterned quilts, supplementing our meager income by selling them at the weekly market. I occupied the middle position amongst my siblings, 2 older brothers, 2 younger sisters. Our home was small, modest, characterized by worn wooden floorboards and a roof that occasionally leaked thin strips of sunlight during the day, moonlight at night. We possessed little in terms of material wealth, yet, crucially, our household never lacked for essential sustenance, nor, more importantly, for mutual respect. My father, despite his bone-deep exhaustion from relentless physical labor, always greeted us children with a warm, genuine smile and, crucially, never once raised his hand in anger towards my mother, a significant rarity, sadly. In that era when societal norms often implicitly granted husbands near ownership of their wives. "Girl, pursue your studies diligently," my mother would often admonish gently while patiently instructing me in the precise art of quilting stitches. "So you need never find yourself entirely dependent upon any man." And study I did. I proved the sole sibling amongst the 5 of us to successfully complete elementary education at our small community school. My teacher, Miss Eleanor, a kind woman with perceptive eyes, recognized a spark within me, a thirst for knowledge, and personally intervened, persuading my parents to permit me to continue my education further. This child possesses a unique light in her eyes. Anthony, I overheard her telling my father earnestly one afternoon, it would constitute a genuine sin to extinguish it prematurely. Through considerable familial sacrifice, I achieved the improbable, becoming a certified teacher at the age of 19. It was 1957, and for a farmer's daughter hailing from the rural countryside, attaining such a professional standing felt akin to performing a small miracle. I vividly recall the undisguised pride shimmering in my father's eyes when I commenced teaching my first class within the very same one-room schoolhouse where I myself had been a student years earlier. "I perceive so much of your mother within you, Josie," he remarked, his voice uncharacteristically thick with emotion. "But possessing a book clutched firmly in your hand, instead of merely a needle and thread. For 3 fulfilling years, I dedicated myself to instructing the town's children, earning a modest salary that significantly contributed towards our family's household expenses. Most young women my age had already embarked upon the expected path of marriage, many already tending to 1 or 2 small children. I remained single, immersed in my students, my books. The town gossips, inevitably, offered their unsolicited commentary. "She'll surely end up a spinster. Too much book learning frightens away potential husbands," the older women would murmur knowingly amongst themselves during quilting bees or church socials. I feigned indifference to their pronouncements, yet confessed privately, within the pages of my journal, to occasional pangs of loneliness, a yearning for companionship. It was during the annual 4th of July town celebration in 1960 that Charles entered my life, altering its trajectory irrevocably. He represented a striking contrast to the local young men, recently arrived from Philadelphia, appointed as an accountant at the newly established bank branch in town. Tall, fair-complexioned, his dark hair meticulously slicked back with Brylcreem, he possessed an urbane manner of speaking that immediately signaled his city education, his sophistication. When he unexpectedly approached and requested a dance during the evening's festivities, my heart commenced a frantic, exhilarating rhythm against my ribs, unlike anything I had previously experienced. "Would you do me the honor of this dance, Miss Josephine?" he inquired, his voice smooth, cultured, accompanied by an elegance utterly foreign to the familiar cadence of local farm boys. Flustered, cheeks burning with a mixture of embarrassment and excitement, I accepted his invitation. We danced 3 consecutive songs, his hand resting lightly, respectfully, on my waist. Afterwards, he escorted me towards the lemonade stand situated near the town square gazebo. "I must confess," he stated, his gaze holding mine intently, rendering me momentarily breathless, "I have never encountered a schoolteacher possessing such remarkable beauty in my entire life." "You are merely attempting to fluster me, Mr. Charles," I stammered, lowering my gaze towards the sweating glass of lemonade clutched in my hand. That encounter marked the commencement of a courtship that immediately set the small town abuzz. An educated, sophisticated man, hailing from the city, expressing genuine interest in Josephine Connors, the unassuming farmer's daughter turned schoolteacher. The very same elderly women, who had previously predicted my perpetual spinsterhood, now whispered amongst themselves that I had miraculously struck gold. Little did any of them realize, little did I realize, that Charles, despite his respectable profession and polished exterior, possessed neither significant inheritance nor influential family connections. He was, much like myself, an individual who had achieved his education through considerable personal effort and sacrifice. Our courtship unfolded over the subsequent 6 months, adhering strictly to the prevailing social customs. My father, or one of my older brothers, consistently accompanied us on chaperoned walks around the town square, or during infrequent excursions to the newly opened cinema located in the neighboring county seat. Charles remained impeccably respectful throughout, never attempting to breach established boundaries. His gifts were modest, thoughtful, a simple hair ribbon, a small box of chocolates, once a slim volume of poetry, which we read aloud together on the quietude of my family's front porch swing. "I wish to marry you, Miss Josephine," he declared one crisp December evening, standing beneath the bare branches of the old apple tree in our yard, my eldest brother observing discreetly from a distance. "If your father grants his permission, I desire to make you my wife." My heart seemed to perform a dizzying somersault within my chest. At 23, I had begun tentatively resigning myself to the likelihood of remaining unmarried. Now, presented with a proposal from this handsome, educated, hard-working man, it felt like an impossible dream manifesting. I require some time to consider, Mr. Charles, I managed to reply, striving to conceal the overwhelming surge of emotion. Yet, truthfully, there existed nothing requiring further consideration. This represented everything I could have possibly hoped for. The following week, Charles formally presented himself at our home to speak with my father, bearing traditional offerings, a bottle of decent whiskey, a fragrant cigar. The two men conversed privately for several hours within the confines of our small living room, while my mother, my sisters, and I waited with unbearable anxiety in the kitchen, pretending to engage in domestic tasks, our ears strained towards the closed door. When it finally opened, my father emerged, his expression initially serious, impenetrable, before slowly breaking into a wide, approving smile. "Come here, my daughter," he beckoned. "Mr. Charles appears to be a respectable, honorable young man. If this is truly your desire, you possess my wholehearted blessing." Our wedding took place the following March, in 1961, within the intimate confines of the small chapel of Our Lady Jideri. It lacked grandeur. Our families possessed limited means for extravagance. Yet, it felt beautiful, sacred. My wedding dress, lovingly sewn by my mother and aunts, incorporated delicate, handmade lace. Charles looked exceptionally elegant in a navy blue suit borrowed from his bank manager boss. Following the ceremony, a modest celebration unfolded in our family's backyard, featuring bountiful food prepared by the women of our community and lively music provided by talented local musicians playing fiddles and banjos. Our first home together was small, but entirely our own. Charles had rented a cozy, two-bedroom house situated conveniently near the bank. It boasted a compact living room, a functional kitchen, and most impressively, an indoor bathroom, a modern luxury I had never previously experienced. During those initial months, I lived within the blissful cocoon of the idealized dream every young woman of my era nurtured. Charles proved consistently attentive, frequently arriving home with bouquets of wildflowers plucked from the roadside meadows, praising my sometimes inexpert cooking with genuine appreciation. During the evenings, his touch remained caring, respectful. I continued my teaching position even after marrying. Many husbands in our community would have forbidden it, viewing a wife's employment outside the home as unnecessary, even improper. Charles, however, seemed genuinely proud of my profession. "My wife must demonstrate her intellectual skills as well," he'd declare possessively, yet proudly, whenever someone questioned my continued employment. I felt, unequivocally, like the luckiest, most fortunate woman in the entire world. Discovering my pregnancy 6 months after our wedding felt like the final, perfect piece completing our idyllic picture. Charles wept openly with joy when I shared the news, his hands trembling slightly as he gently touched my still flat abdomen. "It will undoubtedly be a beautiful daughter, Josie," he predicted with unshakable certainty, already adopting the affectionate nickname that would eventually become my common identifier. "Just as lovely as her mother." And his prediction proved accurate. Marianne arrived on a sweltering January morning in 1962, following a protracted, difficult labor lasting nearly 20 hours. When the attending doctor finally placed her tiny, red-faced, vigorously crying form into my arms, an overwhelming surge of love, fierce and protective, washed over me unlike anything I had ever experienced. Gazing across the delivery room towards Charles, I witnessed that same profound, overflowing love reflected clearly on his face. "She possesses your eyes, Josie," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. At that precise moment, basking in the miracle of new life, cradling our daughter, observing my husband's adoration, I genuinely believed I had attained perfect, unassailable happiness. A devoted husband, a healthy child, a fulfilling profession I cherished. What more could any woman possibly desire? Little did I comprehend then that this idyllic chapter represented merely the calm preceding a devastating storm. That the man I perceived as my safe harbor, my steadfast partner, harbored within him a latent tempest capable of utterly destroying the world we had so hopefully, lovingly constructed together. As my wise mother often cautioned, sometimes the devil arrives dressed impeccably in a suit and tie, offering a charming smile, just before revealing his hidden claws. But that descent into darkness, that painful unraveling, constitutes a chapter too agonizing to recount just yet. Allow me a moment to gather my strength before continuing this difficult narrative. Meanwhile, perhaps reflect upon this. How often do we mistakenly judge life's intricate books solely by their appealing covers? How frequently does the true monster inflicting the deepest wounds turn out to be the very individual we pledge to love, honor, and cherish, until death eventually parts us? The initial weeks following Marianne's birth unfolded in a haze of new mother exhaustion and profound joy. Even amidst the sleepless nights and the inherent insecurities of navigating first-time parenthood, Charles proved remarkably supportive, consistently arriving home earlier from the bank to assist with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, often singing our infant daughter to sleep with a surprisingly gentle baritone voice I hadn't previously known he possessed. Our evenings, once filled with quiet conversations about future aspirations, now revolved entirely around the tiny human who had utterly captivated our hearts and completed our small family. "She possesses your determined little nose, Josie," he'd remark proudly, leaning fondly over the simple wooden crib my carpenter brother had skillfully crafted for his niece. Immersed in this idyllic domesticity, I truly believed I had constructed a small paradise on earth, inhabited by a family seemingly plucked from the pages of the romantic novels I occasionally shared with my students. When Marianne reached 3 months of age, I resumed my teaching duties. Leaving her each morning, even entrusting her to the capable care of my sister-in-law residing just 2 streets away, felt like a physical wrench. Yet, stepping back into the familiar rhythm of the classroom, feeling the chalk dust between my fingers, witnessing the eager curiosity reflected in my students' young faces, this engagement also represented an essential part of my identity. Charles outwardly supported my decision to return to work, though occasional comments surfaced suggesting that perhaps, once additional children arrived, remaining at home might prove more suitable. I readily agreed without significant consideration. In that era, a working wife and mother remained somewhat revolutionary within our conservative community. Marianne's first year passed in a swift, delightful blur of developmental milestones. Soon, she was crawling energetically throughout our small house, her infectious smile revealing the 2 tiny bottom teeth that had recently emerged, proudly calling Dada to Charles even before mastering Mama. He responded with utter adoration, showering her with toys our modest budget couldn't truly accommodate, already formulating ambitious plans for her distant future. "We shall enroll our princess in the finest schools, Josie," he'd declare grandly. "She will become a doctor, perhaps a lawyer, whatever she sets her intelligent mind towards achieving." Life settled into a comfortable, predictable pattern. Dadang. Marianne blossomed into a strong, healthy, perpetually cheerful toddler, her energy seemingly boundless. I continued finding fulfillment in my teaching career, eventually earning a promotion to instruct at the larger consolidated school, located in the center of town, a recognition of my dedication and skill. Charles, too, advanced professionally at the bank, receiving an appointment to a supervisory position. To all outward appearances, to everyone residing within the small, interconnected world of Millfield, we epitomized the perfect, aspirational young family. It commenced subtly, around the time of Marianne's 3rd birthday, the first almost imperceptible shifts in Charles's demeanor, changes initially dismissed as products of stress or fatigue. He began arriving home from the bank later, his mood often sullen, complaining more frequently about minor household matters, the temperature of his dinner, the tidiness of the living room, the normal, exuberant noise generated by a healthy 3-year-old engaged in play. "A man toils arduously all day," he'd grumble, an unfamiliar edge of irritation sharpening his voice. "He deserves tranquility, upon returning to his own home. I attributed his increased irritability to the pressures associated with his new supervisory role at the bank. I endeavored to be more understanding, more accommodating, preparing his favorite meals meticulously, diligently attempting to keep Marianne quieter during the evening hours, preemptively addressing any potential source of annoyance, striving desperately to recapture the easygoing charm, the affectionate smile that had initially captivated me during that long-ago 4th of July celebration. One particular evening, Charles returned home exceptionally late, visibly agitated. An apparent problem involving a significant client account had dominated his workday, and he seemed determined to blame a subordinate employee entirely. Throughout dinner, his conversation consisted solely of vitriolic complaints regarding the employee's perceived incompetence, employing language far harsher, more volatile, than I had ever previously heard him use. "That incompetent fool will answer directly to me tomorrow," he seethed, gesturing emphatically with his fork. "I shall make him profoundly regret ever being born." "Charles, please try to calm yourself," I attempted gently, placing an extra serving of pot roast onto his plate, hoping the familiar comfort food might soothe his temper. "I am certain it was merely an unintentional mistake. Tomorrow, with clearer heads, you can undoubtedly resolve the situation amicably." My interjection proved ill-advised. He slammed his fist down onto the table with shocking force, causing the plates to jump violently, startling Marianne, who immediately burst into frightened tears. "Do not presume to instruct me on how to conduct my business, woman," he roared, his face contorted with sudden, unexpected rage. "What could you possibly comprehend about the complexities of my work?" I sat frozen, paralyzed by the outburst. Never, in our 4 years of marriage, had Charles directed such overt hostility towards me. The man seated opposite me, his features twisted into an unfamiliar mask of fury, felt like a complete stranger. Instinctively, I scooped Marianne into my arms, attempting to comfort her terrified sobs, while Charles abruptly pushed back his chair, stormed out of the house, slamming the front door violently behind him. He returned much later that night, well past midnight, reeking strongly of whiskey. I feigned sleep as he stumbled into our bedroom, undressed clumsily in the darkness, collapsed heavily onto his side of the bed, instantly falling into a drunken stupor. Fear prevented me from confronting him, from demanding an explanation for his unprecedented behavior. The following morning, jarringly, he acted as though the previous evening's incident had never occurred. He prepared coffee for us all, engaged playfully with Marianne over breakfast, even bestowed a perfunctory kiss upon my cheek before departing for the bank. I desperately tried to convince myself it represented an isolated occurrence, a momentary lapse triggered by extreme professional stress, something that would never be repeated. But it did repeat, with increasing frequency, triggered by increasingly trivial perceived provocations. One week, his fury erupted because I purchased a new winter coat for Marianne without first securing his explicit permission. The next, because dinner wasn't ready precisely at the moment he walked through the door. Then, because he discovered a stack of student test papers I had brought home for grading. "You consistently neglect your own child due to preoccupation with these other children, who hold no significance," he yelled, violently tearing the papers, representing hours of my students' diligent efforts, into shreds before my eyes. I began navigating our home as if traversing a minefield, constantly vigilant, meticulously monitoring my every word, every action, attempting futilely to anticipate and preemptively neutralize potential triggers for his next volatile storm. Marianne, though young, possessed an intuitive sensitivity. She too adapted her behavior. The once cheerful, perpetually chattering girl grew increasingly subdued, withdrawn in her father's presence, seemingly striving to render herself invisible. Neighbors began posing concerned, albeit cautious, inquiries. "Miss Josie, are you feeling quite well? You appear exceptionally worn down lately." Or, "Mr. Charles seems unusually stressed these past few months." I deflected their concerns with practiced ease, maintaining the necessary facade of domestic contentment. "Family problems," my mother's ingrained voice echoed internally, "are best resolved privately, within the family." And despite the escalating fear, the growing disillusionment, a part of me still clung desperately to the memory of the man Charles had initially been, the man I had loved. In 1966, when Marianne turned 5, Charles received another significant promotion at the bank, appointed as the official branch manager, a prestigious accomplishment for a man still relatively young. The promotion occasioned a celebratory party hosted by the bank's regional executives, complete with laudatory speeches from the town mayor and champagne, the first time I had ever tasted the effervescent beverage. Charles radiated confidence that evening, basking in the accolades, momentarily reverting to the charming, sophisticated man who had initially swept me off my feet. He proudly introduced me to his colleagues and superiors as my beautiful wife, the dedicated schoolteacher Josephine. His voice imbued with such apparent pride, it momentarily rekindled a dangerous flicker of hope within me. Perhaps this success, this external validation, would finally appease the demons driving his anger, restore equilibrium to our lives. And for a brief, deceptive period following the promotion, it seemed possible. He resumed bringing home small, thoughtful gifts, offered praise for my cooking, allocated time after work to play engagingly with Marianne. I cautiously began lowering my defenses, allowing myself the tentative luxury of smiling genuinely again, relaxing slightly within my own home, daring to hope the storms had finally passed. It was during this fragile interlude of relative peace that I discovered I was pregnant for the second time. When I shared the news with Charles, his reaction mirrored the unadulterated joy he had expressed upon learning about Marianne. He swept me into a tight embrace, spinning me exuberantly around the living room. "We shall have a son this time, Josie," he declared with characteristic certainty, as if possessing the power to predetermine the outcome. A son destined to follow in my footsteps at the bank. Those subsequent months of pregnancy unfolded peacefully. Charles seemed to have successfully subdued his inner turmoil, whatever underlying factors had previously fueled his volatile outbursts. At school, I reduced my teaching hours slightly to prioritize my health, a decision fully supported by my friend and principal. Marianne expressed genuine excitement about the prospect of becoming a big sister, carefully setting aside cherished toys she intended to share with the anticipated new arrival. Our son, Richard, named at Charles's insistence, perhaps foreshadowing his expectations, was born in June of 1967, a robust, healthy baby with my dark complexion and his father's startlingly light eyes. Charles chose the name himself, proclaiming it a powerful name, befitting a future businessman, cradling his newborn son with an almost reverent tenderness. Initially, post Richard's birth, a semblance of domestic harmony prevailed. Charles actively participated in childcare, dividing his time between his demanding bank responsibilities and assisting at home. On weekends, he often took Marianne for outings to the park or for ice cream, allowing me precious time alone with the baby. But then, when Richard reached approximately 4 months of age, he began experiencing recurrent minor illnesses, persistent colds, low-grade fevers, common childhood ailments, yet sufficient to disrupt sleep patterns, provoke incessant crying, and induce profound exhaustion in all of us. It was during this period of heightened stress and sleep deprivation that Charles's darker nature resurfaced, more volatile, more frightening than ever before. The complaints resumed, magnified in intensity. Baby Richard's crying seemed to particularly grate on his nerves, triggering disproportionate anger. "I cannot even achieve coherent thought with this incessant racket," he'd shout, violently slamming the door to the nursery, where I attempted to soothe our distressed infant. Marianne, now 6 years old, reverted to her previous pattern of quiet, watchful withdrawal whenever her father was present. One particularly harrowing evening, following an exceptionally difficult day at the bank, Charles arrived home late to find the house in a state of relative disarray. Richard had been feverish and fretful all day, demanding constant attention. Marianne had accidentally spilled juice on the living room rug. Exhausted, I hadn't managed to maintain the usual standard of perfect household order. "What manner of pigsty is this?" he bellowed the moment he stepped through the front door. "I exhaust myself day after day, breaking my back to provide for this family. And this is the welcome I receive. "Charles, please," I began pleadingly, still holding the feverish, whimpering Richard in my arms. "The baby has been unwell all day. I simply haven't had a moment." I couldn't complete the sentence. For the very first time, his hand struck me. Not a shove, not a grab, but a deliberate, forceful slap across my face. The impact sent me staggering backward, nearly dropping the baby. Marianne, witnessing the act from the bedroom doorway, emitted a high-pitched scream of pure terror I will never forget. "Daddy, no!" Charles seemed momentarily jolted back to awareness by his daughter's cry. He stared down at his own hand, then towards me, my cheek already flaming red from the blow. Then towards Richard, now crying hysterically in my arms. Without uttering another word, he turned abruptly and stormed back out of the house, the violent slam of the front door echoing his departure. That night marked the definitive, irrevocable end of any lingering illusions I harbored regarding my marriage, regarding the man I had chosen. The individual who had solemnly vowed to love and cherish me had deliberately crossed an unforgivable threshold. Later, applying a cold compress to my throbbing cheek while gently rocking Richard back to sleep, Marianne crept silently to my side, perching on the edge of the bed. "Mommy," she whispered, her small voice trembling, Why did Daddy become so angry again? How does one adequately explain such darkness to an innocent child? How does one articulate the terrifying reality that sometimes people change, fracture internally, unleashing a malevolence even they perhaps didn't recognize within themselves? "Daddy is extremely tired, honey," I offered weakly, the only explanation I could muster, knowing its profound inadequacy. Sometimes, grown-ups do regrettable things when they are overwhelmed. Marianne nodded solemnly, exhibiting an understanding far exceeding her tender years, then laid her small head comfortingly in my lap. "It's going to be all right, Mommy," she whispered with fierce loyalty. "I will take care of you. And little Ricky, too." My heart shattered anew hearing those words. A child should never feel burdened with the responsibility of protecting her own mother. That night, huddled protectively with my 2 sleeping children beside me in our shared bed, I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping beside Charles. Should he return, I made another silent, resolute promise to myself. I would find a pathway out of this destructive environment. For their sake, for my own. I would summon the necessary strength, undertake whatever actions proved necessary. What remained terrifyingly unknown at that moment, listening to the gentle patter of rain beginning against the window pane, was that the absolute worst was yet to arrive, that the true monster inhabiting Charles had not yet fully revealed its most horrifying face. And when it finally did, my life, our lives, would be fractured forever in ways I could never have possibly conceived. When a foundation begins to crumble, the initial cracks often appear almost imperceptibly small. A hairline fracture in the plaster, disguised with a fresh coat of paint. A subtle creak in the floorboards easily dismissed as the house settling. A faint, unsettling odor you convince yourself is merely imagined. My marriage disintegrated in a similar fashion, gradually, insidiously, without dramatic fanfare, yet with a relentless constancy I only fully recognized in retrospect. The charming, attentive man I met during that long-ago 4th of July celebration, the man who wooed me with poetry and promises, steadily transformed, so incrementally that I almost failed to register the precise moment his gallant smile yielded to a perpetually closed expression, the moment warmth vanished from his eyes, replaced by coldness, the moment hands that once offered gentle caresses began clenching into fists. Following the birth of Richard, our second child, the deterioration accelerated rapidly. Baby Richard suffered from fragile health during his initial months, plagued by frequent colds and fevers, resulting in protracted periods of inconsolable crying, particularly during the night. I found myself stretched impossibly thin, tending to the demanding needs of an infant, providing attention and reassurance to a frightened 6-year-old Marianne, maintaining my teaching responsibilities at school, and attempting futilely to preserve a semblance of household order sufficient to avoid triggering Charles's volatile temper. Sleep became a forgotten luxury. Meals were often consumed hastily standing at the kitchen counter. Yet, despite my exhaustive efforts, reasons for Charles's displeasure invariably materialized. One day, dinner wasn't served precisely at the expected moment. The next, Marianne's scattered toys offended his sense of order. Then, Richard's persistent crying grated on his nerves. His complaints grew increasingly harsh, laced with bitter accusations. A woman incapable of properly managing her own household hardly deserves the title of wife, he'd declare contemptuously, sometimes violently sweeping dishes from the table into the sink, shattering the wedding china gifted by my mother. I learned to swallow my tears, methodically pick up the broken pieces, soothe the frightened children back to sleep, then lie rigidly beside him in bed, maintaining the greatest possible physical distance, praying for morning. I desperately clung to the narrative that this represented merely a difficult phase, that the pressures of his managerial position at the bank were temporarily overwhelming him, that soon, surely, normalcy would be restored. Men possess their difficult moments, Josie. Mrs. Connie, my well-meaning elderly neighbor, would often remark sympathetically upon encountering me with eyes red-rimmed from weeping. You must exercise patience, child. Marriage requires forbearance. And I attempted patience. Fervently. Prayed daily, pleading for divine strength, begging for the return of the kind, loving Charles the Thirst I had initially married. But my prayers seemed to echo unanswered in the oppressive silence of our increasingly fractured home. The day he first struck me marked the commencement of a terrifying new chapter. It wasn't solely the physical sting that shocked me to the core, but the profound violation, the shattering realization that the man sworn to cherish and protect me before God and our community was capable of inflicting deliberate harm, and worse, had done so in the presence of our young daughter. "Mommy, please don't cry," Marianne would often whisper afterwards, her small hands attempting to dry my tears as I rocked baby Richard, trying to soothe his cries, triggered by the preceding outburst. "I will take care of you." Those heartbreaking words, uttered by a child forced into premature adulthood, only deepened my sense of maternal failure. What sort of mother requires consolation, protection, from her own 6-year-old daughter? What damaging lessons was I inadvertently teaching her about acceptable female roles, about the nature of marriage, about enduring abuse? Following each incident of violence, Charles predictably cycled through phases of dramatic contrition, arriving home bearing flowers, offering tearful apologies, swearing vehemently it would never occur again, inevitably followed by periods of renewed tension, culminating in further explosions triggered by increasingly trivial perceived offenses. I began noticing disturbing changes in Marianne's behavior as well. The once exuberant, talkative girl retreated further into herself, moving through the house with unnatural quietness, her gaze perpetually downcast, startling violently at any sudden noise, particularly when her father raised his voice. On Sundays, the days he typically took her for father-daughter outings, walks in the park, trips for ice cream, she would return unusually subdued, possessing a distant, vacant look in her eyes that felt profoundly incongruous for a child her age. "Do you no longer enjoy your walks with Daddy, sweetheart?" I inquired gently one afternoon, noticing her hiding beneath her bed upon hearing Charles call her name. "No, Mommy," she replied immediately, her eyes wide with an unidentifiable fear that sent a chill down my spine. I don't wish to be alone with him anymore." Something in the intensity of her fear, the quiet desperation in her voice, triggered a maternal alarm bell deep within me. I wanted to press further, understand the root cause of her sudden aversion. But Charles appeared at her bedroom doorway then, impatient, dismissive. "What nonsense is this now?" he demanded irritably. "Are you deliberately attempting to spoil her? Cease this foolishness, girl. Emerge from under there immediately, and let us depart." He reached down, grasped her arm firmly, pulling her resisting form out from under the bed, effectively dragging her towards the front door, while she cast a silent, pleading look back towards me. Powerless, trapped within my own fear, I remained behind with baby Richard, deeply unsettled, plagued by a formless yet pervasive sense of dread I couldn't quite name. When they returned several hours later, Marianne immediately fled to her room, shutting the door firmly behind her, avoiding my questioning gaze. Charles, conversely, appeared remarkably normal, almost jovial, presenting both children with bags of penny candy acquired from the corner store. That evening, I sat beside Marianne's bed, intending to read her usual bedtime story. She lay curled tightly beneath the blankets, despite the warmth of the evening, as if seeking refuge from an unseen threat. "What transpired during your walk today, my love?" I asked softly, gently stroking her hair back from her forehead. She remained silent for such a prolonged period I began to suspect she had drifted off to sleep. Then finally, in a voice so faint it was barely audible, she whispered, Daddy took me to a different place today." She paused, swallowing hard. "He stated it was to be our special secret. What sort of place, honey?" I prompted gently, trying to keep the rising anxiety from my voice. "A house, situated at the far end of Market Street. There's a man residing there who takes photographs." My blood ran cold. "Photographs? What manner of photographs?" I am unsure exactly, Mommy," Marianne stammered, beginning to tremble beneath the blankets. "Daddy instructed me I had to remove my dress. Said it was necessary for a special job. He became very angry when I started to cry." I couldn't bear to hear more. A buzzing filled my ears. The room seemed to momentarily tilt. I wanted desperately to disbelieve, to rationalize, but the pieces clicked together with horrifying certainty. The secretive trips, Marianne's fear, Charles's unpredictable behavior. My God, what had he done? I couldn't sleep that night, consumed by a sickening mixture of rage, terror, and profound maternal guilt. My mind raced, replaying every potential warning sign I had overlooked, every instance where I had prioritized maintaining peace over confronting uncomfortable truths. I desperately wanted to confront Charles immediately, demand answers, unleash the fury boiling within me. Yet, a colder, more pragmatic instinct cautioned restraint. If my worst fears proved true, a direct confrontation could escalate the danger, not only for myself, but, more critically, for my children. The following day, fabricating an excuse about needing specialty thread from the fabric store, I walked purposefully towards Market Street, seeking the house Marianne had described. I located it easily, an unremarkable storefront with discreet signage identifying it as a photography studio. Lacking the courage to enter directly, I observed from across the street for over an hour. Eventually, Charles's familiar car pulled up. He emerged, greeted the man standing in the doorway, presumably the photographer, with casual familiarity, then disappeared inside. I returned home, trembling, the bitter certainty solidifying into a suffocating weight in my chest. I didn't possess the full, explicit details yet, but I knew, unequivocally, that something deeply wrong, something potentially monstrous, was occurring, and my daughter was inexplicably entangled within it. Over the subsequent days, I became hypervigilant, scrutinizing every interaction between Charles and Marianne with terrifying new clarity. I began noticing subtle behaviors I had previously dismissed or rationalized. His insistence on personally bathing her, despite her protests that she was old enough to manage independently. The frequency with which he pulled her onto his lap, even when she clearly resisted. The proprietary, unsettling way his gaze sometimes lingered upon her when he believed himself unobserved. One evening, drawn by the faint sound of muffled weeping, I silently entered Marianne's darkened bedroom. She lay curled beneath her covers, crying silently into her pillow. "What is it, my angel?" I whispered, sitting gently on the edge of her bed. "Mommy," she sobbed brokenly, I don't want Daddy to come into my room anymore when I'm sleeping. He does things that hurt me." Those softly spoken words struck my heart like a physical dagger. For a paralyzing moment, I couldn't draw breath, couldn't process the horrific implication. Then, the full, devastating reality crashed down upon me. My husband, the father of my children, was sexually abusing our own daughter. What specific things, Marianne? I forced myself to ask, my voice choked, needing absolute confirmation, even though each word felt like swallowing shards of glass. Between heartbroken sobs, she recounted details no child should ever comprehend, let alone experience. Described the nocturnal visits when he believed me asleep. Repeated the manipulative threats he employed to ensure her silence. Articulated the profound pain, confusion, and shame she carried. I gathered my shattered daughter into my arms, holding her trembling body tightly against my own. My tears finally flowing unrestrained, mingling with hers. How could I have remained so blind for so long? How could I have failed so profoundly to protect her from the monster residing under our own roof? Overwhelming guilt threatened to consume me, interwoven with a white-hot rage unlike anything I had ever known. Never again, my precious daughter, I vowed fiercely, holding her face gently between my hands, forcing her to meet my gaze. He will never lay a hand upon you again. I promise you this. That very night, while Charles lay snoring in a drunken stupor beside me, I crept silently from our bed and began packing a small suitcase, gathering essential documents, preparing to flee at first light, intending to seek refuge at the home of a former teaching colleague residing in a neighboring town. But as I finalized the preparations, a floorboard creaked betrayingly. I heard the rustle of movement from the bed. Charles stood silhouetted in the doorway, observing the open suitcase. "What?" he inquired, his voice dangerously calm, devoid of its usual slurred quality. "Precisely do you believe you are doing, Josephine?" "I am leaving," I stated, attempting to project a firmness I didn't feel, my heart hammering against my ribs. "And I'm taking my children with me." His laugh echoed coldly in the pre-dawn stillness, devoid of any humor. "Do you genuinely imagine I would permit you to simply walk away with my children? Do you truly believe you could survive independently? Who would provide shelter, food, clothing? You possess nothing without me, Josephine. Absolutely nothing. I would prefer to starve homeless on the street," I retorted, fueled by righteous maternal fury, "than endure one additional day residing under the same roof as you." Courage, born of desperation, surged through me. "I know what you have been perpetrating against Marianne. I know about the photography studio. I know what transpired tonight when you believed me asleep. You are not merely a bully, Charles. You are a monster." It felt like igniting a fuse. His face contorted instantly into a mask of pure hatred. Before I could react, defend myself, I felt the explosive impact of his fist connecting with my face. I stumbled backward, crashing against the dresser, stunned, the familiar metallic taste of blood flooding my mouth. "You are going absolutely nowhere," he growled, advancing towards me, ripping the suitcase from my grasp, violently scattering its contents across the bedroom floor. "And if you ever dare utter a single word regarding this to anyone, I swear upon my life, I will silence you permanently, and those precious brats along with you. Who do you imagine anyone would believe? Me? The respected bank manager? Or you, the hysterical, unstable school teacher?" I remained crumpled on the floor, feigning submission, acutely aware of the immediate danger, while his venomous threats continued. Internally, however, something had irrevocably shifted. Any lingering vestiges of affection, respect, or even tolerance I might have harbored for him vanished completely. In their place solidified a fierce, unwavering determination. I would protect my children. I would escape this house of horrors. I would find a way, regardless of the cost. That night, lying rigidly beside the man I now recognized unequivocally as my enemy, I renewed my silent vow. I would find a pathway towards liberation, towards safety for Marianne and Richard, even if it represented the final act of my existence. What remained terrifyingly unclear was how, when, or if that opportunity might ever present itself. It arrived, unexpectedly, violently, on an April night destined to alter our lives forever. Certain nights become permanently branded upon the soul, like cauterized wounds. April 7th, 1969, remains such a night for me. Every horrifying detail, every terrifying sound, every acrid smell etched indelibly into my memory, impervious to the passage of over 5 decades. It was a Wednesday evening. I distinctly recall the date because Wednesdays were reserved for the women's prayer meeting at our local church, a small sanctuary of peace I clung to amidst the escalating turmoil of my home life. Charles openly disapproved of these weekly excursions, grumbling about neglected household duties, perceiving my brief respite as a personal affront. Yet, I persisted. That solitary hour spent in quiet contemplation within God's house provided my only consistent refuge from the pervasive fear that had become my constant, suffocating companion. Richard, my youngest, not yet 2 years old, had fallen asleep early that evening, exhausted from a day spent energetically exploring the boundaries of our small backyard. Marianne, now 8, should have been asleep as well, tucked into her own small bed. Charles had purportedly attended a late meeting at the bank, or so he claimed upon departing earlier. I returned home around 9 o'clock, the house unusually, unnervingly silent. Normally, Charles would already be present, pacing impatiently, ready to criticize my perceived tardiness. Slipping off my shoes at the door to avoid making noise, I placed my worn prayer book carefully in the dresser drawer and proceeded quietly down the hallway to check on the children, a nightly ritual. Richard's room remained peaceful, his small form breathing rhythmically, curled protectively around his favorite stuffed rabbit. However, as I approached Marianne's bedroom door, a sound reached me that instantly froze the blood in my veins, a faint, muffled cry, choked back, as if someone desperately attempted to stifle their own sounds of distress. And beneath the weeping, his voice, Charles's voice, low, menacing, threatening. "If you dare breathe a word of this to your mother, she won't believe you anyway. And even if she did, she'd undoubtedly blame you." Propelled by a surge of pure, unadulterated maternal terror, I shoved the door open violently. The scene confronting me surpassed my most horrific nightmares. Marianne huddled against the far wall, her small body trembling uncontrollably, face streaked with tears, eyes wide with paralyzing terror. And Charles, my God, the image remains searingly vivid. Charles stood over her, hastily attempting to fasten his trousers. Upon registering my sudden presence, his face contorted into a mask of pure fury. "What in hell are you doing back so early?" he snarled, abandoning pretense. "You should still be at that useless church meeting." I didn't respond verbally. Something ancient, primal, erupted within me. A force fueled by years of suppressed rage, fear, and fierce maternal protectiveness. I launched myself at him, pulling him backward by the hair with a strength I didn't know I possessed, a violence utterly foreign to my nature. He staggered, momentarily surprised by the ferocity of my unexpected assault. Seizing the brief advantage, I grabbed Marianne's small hand, pulling her towards the hallway. "Run, my daughter," I urged desperately, shoving her towards Richard's room. "Get your brother. Go immediately to Mrs. Catherine's house across the street." She hesitated, her terrified eyes locked on mine. "Go now, honey. Please, I will hold him back." I don't know precisely where the courage originated, perhaps from sheer maternal desperation, perhaps from finally reaching an absolute breaking point. When Charles recovered and attempted to push past me, intent on pursuing the children, I physically blocked his path, positioning myself squarely between him and the hallway like an immovable wall. "Get out of my way, woman," he roared, shoving me hard against the doorframe. "This is none of your damn business. None of my business." I shrieked back, propelled by righteous fury. "They are my children, you depraved monster." He attempted to push past me again, his superior strength easily overpowering mine. But as we struggled violently in the narrow hallway, a sudden memory surfaced, the pair of heavy-duty sewing shears I kept hidden beneath my mattress, initially acquired with the vague notion of self-defense, never imagining I might actually be forced to wield them. Managing to break free from his grasp for a fleeting instant, I sprinted towards our bedroom. He pursued me, laughing cruelly, that chilling sound echoing ominously. "What pathetic defense do you imagine you can muster now, Josie?" he taunted. "Think you possess the nerve to actually challenge me?" Reaching beneath the mattress, my fingers closed around the cool metal handles of the shears. I turned, confronting him as he filled the doorway, holding the sharp blades defensively before me. Stay away from me, I warned, my voice trembling but resolute. Stay away from my children. He paused at the threshold, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected weapon, then commenced laughing again, that same cold, dismissive sound. You lack the courage, Josephine. Do not test me, Charles, I pleaded, my voice cracking. For God's sake, do not push me further tonight. Something in my tone, perhaps the raw desperation, the sheer finality, must have finally registered. He took a hesitant step backward. At that precise moment, the sound of the front door bursting open downstairs echoed upwards, followed by urgent voices. Marianne, my brave, terrified daughter, had successfully reached safety, alerted the neighbors. It was Mr. Joseph, our neighbor from across the street, accompanied by 2 other men, whose faces I didn't immediately recognize in the dim hallway light. What is all this commotion? Mr. Joseph called out cautiously, ascending the stairs. Is everything all right here, Mrs. Josie? Instantly, Charles underwent a chilling metamorphosis, shedding the monstrous persona, seamlessly adopting the facade of the charming, educated man the town knew. Just a minor domestic disagreement, Joseph, he called back smoothly, adjusting his disheveled clothing. My wife, she occasionally becomes overwrought. You understand how women can be. But Marianne, my courageous child, refused to permit his lie to stand. He was hurting me, Mr. Joseph. Her small, clear voice piped up from the bottom of the stairs where she stood, huddled protectively beside Mrs. Catherine. He was doing bad things to me. A stunned silence followed her accusation, heavy, absolute. Mr. Joseph and the other 2 men, one of whom I now recognized as Sheriff Davis, looked from Charles's suddenly pale face, towards me still clutching the sewing shears defensively, then down towards my trembling children, huddled near the doorway. Something within Marianne's terrified eyes, that irrefutable, genuine terror no child could possibly fabricate, must have conveyed the truth more powerfully than any adult testimony could. Perhaps it would be best, Sheriff Davis stated calmly, his voice holding quiet authority, if you accompanied us down to the station, Mr. Charles. We can discuss this matter further there. This is utterly absurd, Charles protested, attempting to regain control, resorting to indignation. It's merely the word of a confused, imaginative child against mine. I am the bank manager, a respected member of this community. And I, the sheriff, countered evenly, his gaze cold, unwavering. Am the father of 3 young daughters myself. We shall ascertain the truth of this situation properly. As the sheriff and the other men escorted a sputtering, protesting Charles downstairs and out of the house, Mrs. Catherine rushed towards me, enveloping me in a tight, comforting embrace. It will be all right now, Josie, she murmured soothingly. It is finally over. Yet, deep within, I knew this ending merely represented the beginning of a different kind of ordeal. In a small conservative town like Millfield in the late 1960s, accusations of this nature, particularly against a man holding Charles's social position, would inevitably face immense skepticism, resistance. Justice, I suspected, would prove elusive, difficult to attain. At the police station later that evening, my fears proved well-founded. I found myself subjected to questioning that felt more like an interrogation, treated implicitly as if I were somehow the perpetrator, not the victim. Are you absolutely certain, ma'am? Might you perhaps have misinterpreted the situation? Your husband holds such a highly regarded position within our community. The questions dripped with inherent doubt, veiled judgment. Marianne, thankfully, was spared the trauma of a formal interrogation due to the timely intervention of Father Roman, our parish priest, who arrived at the station shortly after hearing of the incident. This child has endured sufficient trauma already, he stated firmly to the sheriff. If her testimony proves necessary, it must be obtained with appropriate sensitivity, in the presence of a qualified child advocate or physician. Charles spent only a single night, confined to the local jail cell. The following morning, he was released after posting bail. Predictably, gossip spread through Millfield like wildfire. Is it genuinely true? Or did Miss Josie perhaps fabricate the story because he was involved with another woman? That Marianne girl always possessed a vivid imagination, likely confused fantasy with reality. Mr. Charles, such a hard-working, respectable man. It simply cannot be true. Mrs. Catherine graciously offered us refuge in her home during those initial tumultuous days. Returning to my own house, confronting the scene of violation felt impossible, terrifying, fearing Charles might reappear at any moment. My children remained deeply traumatized, particularly Marianne, who suffered recurring nightmares, waking screaming nearly every night. "It's all right now, my love," I'd soothe, holding her trembling body close against mine. "Mommy promises, no one will ever harm you again." But how could I possibly guarantee that promise? I possessed nowhere safe to go permanently, no financial resources for relocation, no family remaining in town, capable of offering sustained support. My parents had passed years prior. My siblings resided far away, burdened with their own financial struggles. It was during this period of profound uncertainty, feeling utterly trapped, that Father Roman facilitated the visit that would ultimately alter the course of our lives. He arrived at Mrs. Catherine's house one afternoon, accompanied by an elderly woman I didn't recognize, elegantly dressed, possessing an air of quiet, serene authority that immediately inspired confidence. "Mrs. Josie," the priest began gently, "allow me to introduce Mrs. Augusta Bennet. She serves as headmistress of the prestigious Girls' Academy located in Harrisburg." He explained, "Mrs. Bennet became aware of your difficult circumstances and has traveled here specifically to offer potential assistance." Mrs. Augusta extended a gloved hand towards me. Her grip felt firm, reassuring. "My dear," she stated, her voice kind yet direct, "Father Roman has apprised me of your situation. I am here today to formally offer you a position as a teacher at our academy. Additionally," she added, anticipating my unspoken concerns, "we can provide modest housing for you and your children within the designated teachers' quarters on campus. It would offer a safe, structured environment for you all to begin." Tears streamed down my face, tears not of sorrow this time, but of overwhelming relief, profound gratitude. It felt like divine intervention, an answer to my desperate, unspoken prayers. But why, ma'am?" I stammered, bewildered by such unexpected generosity from a complete stranger. "You don't even know me." Mrs. Augusta offered a faint, sad smile, imbued with deep understanding. "Let us simply say," she replied cryptically, "that I recognize your predicament perhaps more intimately than I would prefer. 20 years ago, a young teacher facing circumstances distressingly similar to your own crossed my path. I failed to offer her the necessary support, the tangible assistance she required." Her voice dropped slightly. "She tragically took her own life 1 week later. I vowed then," her gaze met mine, filled with quiet determination, "that I would never again remain idle when confronted with another woman suffering, particularly when possessing the means to potentially intervene." A week later, under the protective escort of Father Roman and several supportive men from the church community, my children and I boarded a Greyhound bus bound for Harrisburg. I departed Millfield, leaving behind the house, the furniture, nearly all our worldly possessions. None of it mattered. What mattered solely were Marianne and Richard, sleeping peacefully on the bus seats beside me, finally, blessedly, liberated from the pervasive terror that our home had tragically become. Regarding Charles, I learned later, through indirect channels, that following the public scandal, the bank quietly transferred him to a distant branch in another state. Like so many similar incidents involving men of position in that era, the situation was effectively hushed up, swept beneath the rug. There would be no formal trial, no conventional justice served. But we were free from his immediate grasp. And at that precarious moment, freedom felt like the only form of justice truly attainable. Harrisburg and the Girls' Academy, under Mrs. Augusta's steady guidance, became our sanctuary, our crucible of healing. The initial months focused on adaptation, establishing routines, processing the immense trauma we had endured. Marianne commenced therapy with Dr. Clare, a compassionate child psychologist affiliated with the academy. Slowly, painstakingly, through art therapy and gentle conversation, She began to articulate the full extent of the abuse, unburdening herself of the terrible secrets she had carried. Richard, too young to fully grasp the preceding events, adapted more readily, thriving within the structured, nurturing environment of the Academy's small nursery school. I poured my energy into my teaching responsibilities, finding solace and purpose within the classroom, instructing English and literature to bright, eager, elementary-aged girls. The quiet orderliness of the Academy, its predictable rhythms, felt like a balm applied to my own raw, frayed nerves. In 1971, nearly 2 years after our arrival, I witnessed a profound shift in Marianne. We were sitting together one Sunday afternoon on the small porch attached to our teacher's quarters apartment. 10 years old now, she diligently sketched in her notebook, a favorite pastime. But something felt different. The dark, unsettling images that had previously dominated her artwork, distorted figures, shadowy backgrounds, had yielded to vibrant, colorful scenes, cheerful flowers, whimsical butterflies, a small house depicted with welcomingly open windows. "How lovely, sweetheart," I commented softly, feeling a surge of cautious hope bloom within my chest. "What picture are you creating today?" She looked up, meeting my gaze directly, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I saw a genuine sparkle of light return to her eyes, reminiscent of the carefree girl she had been before the darkness descended. "It's our house, Mommy," she announced proudly. "The one we're going to have ourselves someday." In that simple declaration, I knew, definitively, we were navigating the correct path. The deepest wounds might never entirely vanish, but healing, genuine healing, was demonstrably possible. Time continued its relentless march, filled with the demanding rhythms of work, the steady progress of my children's education, the accumulation of small, everyday joys I had once believed irrevocably lost, shared laughter over dinner, bedtime stories read aloud, quiet walks through the Academy's beautiful, manicured grounds. Richard entered elementary school, proving himself an intelligent, inquisitive student. Marianne, though still bearing the invisible scars of her trauma, blossomed academically and socially, forming close friendships amongst her Academy peers, participating actively in school clubs and activities, gradually reclaiming her smile. In 1975, however, a letter arrived that momentarily shattered our hard-won tranquility. Forwarded from my sister still residing in Millfield, it delivered unwelcome news. Charles had unexpectedly returned to town. He was reportedly seeking information regarding our whereabouts. "He's been consuming large amounts of alcohol again," my sister wrote, her concern palpable even through the ink, "and making unsettling remarks about reclaiming his children, claiming you possessed no legal right to take them." She concluded with a stark warning: "Exercise extreme caution, Josie." A familiar cold dread washed over me. I immediately consulted Mrs. Augusta, sharing the contents of the letter, my hands trembling slightly. She read it carefully, her expression hardening with resolve. "Do not succumb to fear, Josephine," she stated firmly, placing a reassuring hand on my arm. "He cannot possibly reach you here. You possess the full protection of this institution, the support of the church community, and," she added with quiet intensity, "my unwavering personal protection." Her steadfast confidence proved reassuring. And indeed, Charles never attempted to locate us in Harrisburg. I learned later, again through indirect channels via my sister, that his return to Millfield had been brief, tumultuous. He was arrested shortly thereafter, following a violent altercation with a bank teller during a drunken rage. He ultimately died in prison several months later, succumbing to complications related to advanced liver cirrhosis brought on by years of chronic alcoholism. Upon receiving this final news, I felt no elation, no sense of vengeful satisfaction, not even profound relief. What I experienced primarily was a strange, quiet sense of closure, the definitive end of a terrifying chapter, as if a heavy, burdensome book could finally be closed, shelved, and left undisturbed. In 1977, marking 10 years since Richard's birth and 8 years since our desperate flight from Millfield, Mrs. Augusta presented me with an unexpected, transformative opportunity. The Academy planned a significant expansion, including the establishment of a dedicated elementary school wing, and she formally invited me to assume the role of its director. The offer represented profound recognition of my years of dedicated work, my demonstrated commitment to the students. "You possess a natural gift for leadership, Josephine," Mrs. Augusta stated warmly. "And equally importantly, you possess deep compassion. Those qualities are precisely what we require to effectively shape the hearts and minds of these young girls." I accepted the challenging position with a mixture of profound gratitude, excitement, and underlying apprehension. I had never previously occupied such a significant role of administrative responsibility. Yet, I discovered, as Mrs. Augusta had predicted, that I possessed innate abilities I hadn't fully recognized within myself: organizational skills honed through years of managing crisis, empathetic wisdom born from personal suffering, a quiet strength forged in the fires of adversity. Under my directorship, the elementary wing thrived. We implemented innovative, progressive teaching methodologies, integrated arts and music more fully into the core curriculum, actively encouraged critical thinking, curiosity, empowered the young girls to envision futures, extending beyond the traditional domestic limitations society often imposed upon them. "An educated girl becomes a free woman" evolved into the unofficial motto guiding our educational philosophy. It represented a truth I believed fiercely, a principle I wished I had fully grasped earlier in my own life. Marianne grew into young womanhood, observing my work, absorbing these ambient lessons of female empowerment and resilience. At 17, she announced her intention to pursue a legal career, surprising me with the intensity of her conviction. "I desire to help women like us, Mommy," she declared, a determined fire illuminating her eyes, filling me with immense pride. "Ensure they understand their choices, possess knowledge of their rights, never feel trapped or silenced." In 1980, witnessing Marianne receive her acceptance letter to the prestigious law program at Penn State University felt like a victory transcending personal achievement. My daughter, who had endured the most horrific form of childhood trauma, was purposefully channeling her pain, transforming it into a powerful force for positive change. Richard, then 13, already spoke earnestly about his aspiration to become a doctor, to care for people properly, like Dr. Claire cared for us. He'd often state with youthful gravity. The 1980s ushered in significant changes, both within the broader American society and within the microcosm of our own family. The nation grappled with the complexities of the Reagan era. Women continued making strides, occupying spaces previously denied them in professional and public life. And I, at 46, unexpectedly found love again. Sebastian, a history professor at a local college, entered my life quietly, persistently. A kind-hearted widower, he possessed a gentle demeanor, an inherent integrity that initially felt almost frightening. Following the profound betrayal inflicted by Charles, I had constructed formidable defenses around my heart, convinced I could never fully trust another man, certainly never love again. Sebastian demonstrated extraordinary patience, never pressuring, never demanding, never rushing. With the quiet persistence of someone who truly comprehends the value of time, he gradually earned my trust, dismantling my defenses brick by careful brick. It required nearly 3 years of tentative friendship, evolving into courtship before I finally felt secure enough to accept his proposal of marriage. "I cannot offer you perfection, Josie," he stated honestly, presenting me with a simple, elegant engagement band, only a sincere, unwavering love, and my absolute commitment to perpetually respecting the remarkable woman you are. We married in 1985, in a quiet, intimate ceremony held within the familiar, comforting walls of the Academy Chapel. Marianne, recently graduated and embarking upon her legal career, and Richard, then immersed in medical school studies, served proudly as our maid of honor and best man. Mrs. Augusta, elderly now, but still sharp-witted and keenly observant, offered her heartfelt blessing. With Sebastian, I discovered the profound truth that not all men mirrored Charles's monstrosity. That building, a relationship founded upon mutual respect, deep understanding, genuine companionship, and authentic intimacy was indeed possible. It wasn't always effortless. Moments arose when the long shadows of my past intruded unexpectedly, triggering reflexive fear, causing me to momentarily withdraw emotionally. Sebastian never reacted with impatience or complaint. Everyone carries their unique scars, Josie, he'd state gently during such times. I am here beside you, steadfastly, through the luminous hours and the difficult ones, through the sunlit days and the inevitable storms. We shared nearly 20 fulfilling years together before pancreatic cancer claimed him in 2004. Those years represented a period of profound personal growth, continued healing, and the quiet, contented happiness I once believed utterly unattainable. His death left an undeniable void, yet not an abyss of despair. Losing Charles had felt like escaping a suffocating prison. Losing Sebastian felt like bidding farewell to a cherished, deeply loved travel companion, filled with immense gratitude for the miles shared. Today, at 85, reflecting upon the long, often tumultuous arc of my existence, I perceive a life profoundly marked by extremes. Pain so deep, it nearly obliterated my spirit, counterbalanced by joys so pure, so redemptive, they ultimately illuminated the path forward. I witness my children, now accomplished adults, navigating their own lives, raising their own families. Marianne, a respected attorney championing the rights of women and children. Richard, a dedicated pediatrician known for his gentle bedside manner, embodying the compassion he experienced as a child. I observe my grandchildren growing within loving homes, where respect constitutes the foundational principle, not a conditional exception, where they understand, implicitly, they are unconditionally loved, inherently safe, possess voices valued and heard. This perhaps represents my most significant, most enduring victory. The successful disruption of the destructive cycle of violence, the conscious creation of a different, healthier narrative for our family legacy. If 85 years have imparted any singular wisdom, it is this: suffering need not represent the final destination. Even from the darkest, most desolate ashes, something unexpectedly beautiful, something resiliently strong, can ultimately emerge. Our life stories are not immutably defined by external forces, regardless of how powerful those forces may seem, but rather by the cumulative choices we make when confronted by adversity. To anyone listening now, perhaps currently navigating your own dark valley of shadows, please internalize this message: you are not alone. A pathway forward, however obscured it may currently appear, always exists. Healing might feel impossibly distant right now, particularly when pain remains immediate, acute. But please, believe me when I assert, rebuilding is possible. Healing is attainable. Rediscovering joy, even after profound suffering, remains achievable.